This week on the MotoMan podcast, we sit down with a designer whose career is defined by taking big risks. He ran design for North America, where he led the incredible team behind the one and only ND Miata. Then, 10 years ago, he walked away from a dream job to join a startup named Ativa. Today, you may know it better as Lucid Motors.
I think Lucid has the potential to be much, much more than a car company, just simply by our philosophy and our approach and our supporters.
But the early days weren't about designing, they were about defining. Why start with a luxury sedan and not a safer crossover? And what established performance car did they set as the dynamic target for what would become the Lucid Air?
And we just thought, if we want to show off EV excellence, the sedan format was a great place to start.
The target was an M5, dynamically.
Dynamically, yes.
Yeah. Derek reveals the watershed event that cemented Lucid's future while other EV startups crumbled, and why that decision was so strategic. Plus, we talk about the future, including the next, smaller car, and why he's fighting to keep tactile feel in a digital world.
And we met with a public investment fund of Saudi Arabia, which is PIF. It's the sovereign wealth fund for the country of Saudi Arabia. If the function makes more sense to have an analog experience for tactile and for visual, I'm all for it. Let's embellish it and make it work.
Finally, an emotional conversation about the devastating loss of his self-built Malibu home and his personal car collection, and the special car that miraculously survived the fires.
Yeah, so that night, the fires came through. He could see it coming, and I'm like, listen, don't worry about it. Get out of there. Took out the house late at night, and the chassis, the motor, everything was just molten metal.
So I did the math, and I kind of can't believe this, but 10 years now, you're at Lucid.
It has been 10. It was 10 years in August. Yeah.
I still remember like it was yesterday. You were leaving Mazda, and you were like, "Hey man, I can't tell you where I'm going." I'm like, "What?" And it was, what was it, Ativa at that time?
It was Ativa was the parent company. Yeah.
So what was the pitch? Because you had quite a gig. You were running design for North America for Mazda, and you, like, very few people have had the career you've had. We'll get into it a bit, but like one of the highlights, the ND Miata was done under your tutelage.
Yeah. I mean, it was a global project, but we had the Irvine studio where we were based had a huge hand in that, in terms of kind of getting the early concepts off the ground and the research that went into that. You can imagine North America is a huge market for the Miata, always has been. There's a history and going all the way back to the first Miata in terms of its origins. So we were able to play a huge role in that. And it's really definitely a career highlight, that program, for sure.
So we're going to get into your career because it's an unusual career, but what was the pitch? What was the dream they sold you to come to then Ativa, now Lucid?
I don't know how much of the pitch is what drew me to it. I think it was at a point in my career where I was questioning, like, I felt like, man, this urgency, this anxiety that, like, man, the business is going to change. It felt like it, I had a close friend, Franz von Holzhausen, who took the plunge a few years earlier to go work at Tesla. And so I watched that from afar and saw that success flourish, and made me a believer that stuff like that was becoming possible. This entrepreneurial approach to big automotive opportunities. And so I always had in the back of my head, man, if that kind of seed of opportunity like that came along, I should take it very serious, because it's like I've done many, many years inside the big automotive corporations with Volkswagen and Audi, now Mazda. And it was like, when they came and said, "Hey, we're this group of talented individuals comprised predominantly of former Tesla people. Would you be interested in this?" And that was the pitch. Quite frankly, it was part my kind of wanting to take on something new and big, and then they were like, I felt like they were the right group of people that could had a shot, even if a slim shot.
Why do you think? Give me 3 reasons why they were the right group of people.
Well, I mean, I think the main reason was that they were there for the Tesla kind of challenge and in getting that off the ground in the early days, and they understood much of what it took. The folklore around Tesla at that time wasn't what it is now, certainly, but nevertheless, what they had achieved at that moment in time was already so impressive and so enticing. Certainly, Peter Rawlinson being attached to it, I knew about him prior to meeting him. And I knew
And for the avoidance of doubt, he was the product manager on the S.
he was the head engineer of Model S. And so he was the one leading the engineering team behind that. And so that I felt like, okay, this guy really understands what it takes from an architectural standpoint to do a fantastic electric vehicle. And I was already super impressed with the Tesla Model S. And I felt like if we could work together closely, and I feel like there was already a synergy in that first meeting, I felt like we got a real shot at that. So, that was from that point on, kind of took the plunge and
And
went
at
from
that
there.
point, so this is 2015,
Yeah.
did they have a concept of what they wanted it to look like? Or did they say, we've got this wonderful, like, roller skate. We'd like you to put a pretty wrapper on it.
I think there was an architectural concept already in place, but we were still having dialogue at that point. Like, is this the right type of vehicle? Should we pursue a sedan? Should we pursue an SUV? What do we want to be when we grow up? That was still being formulated. So I came in at a really good time where I could have a strong voice and team up with the people that were already in place, and just went to work, quite honestly. And we studied a series of concepts and market positions and settled on this advanced kind of, I would call it, reimagination of what a sport luxury sedan could be. And then we were off to the races.
So let's get into that a little bit, because I felt like you and I, what people don't know about you is you're as much of a car freak as I am, probably worse, because you have unusual tastes. We're both Porsche guys, but you like VW buses. You like buggies, things like that. And I gotta believe there was a debate on what that first car should be. And as much as your business side from Volkswagen, Audi, Mazda says you should probably make a crossover, you want something pretty and sexy like a sedan. What was the debate of form factor? Forget about the roller skate, which effectively was the same. What's the form factor discussion?
Yeah, it was a difficult discussion in those early days because it was already clear that the sedan format and even the luxury sedan format, although not in free fall yet, that it had slowed down, and that there seemed to already in 2015 seemed that there was no end in sight to the crossover, not just the crossover growth. I would call it the mutation of what SUV and crossover even means. And even since 2015, that's changed a lot. So, yeah, so that debate and what we could, we knew most likely we were going to have premium to luxury positioning just because of the technology and being a new company. So whatever we did, we needed to make sure we could hit a certain price point and hit a certain target consumer.
Let me interject there for a minute. I never asked you this before. Was there ever a discussion, we want to be a luxury car company or we want to be everyman car company? Or was it just because of the R&D costs of EV, we have to be a luxury car company?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think first and foremost, we had ambitions for our own in-house technologies, in-house battery, in-house motor inverter. So we wanted our core technologies, and we knew that we had to invest in that, and that there was going to be a cost to bring that to market and really be the top leader at that. And then I think that if you look at that and where the consumer exists for that, and then you start to think, well, we're going to start low volume and move to larger volumes as we evolve, you end up in a luxury positioning. And I just think that was the business strategy straight up. So then that informs who you're going after. That informs what the aesthetic level needs to be, how we market it, showrooms. It just snowballs from there. But brand, basically the brand development. And I think that was the early discussion. And then of course is it a sedan? Is it a sports car? Is it an SUV? We had those discussions and we had those debates, and obviously looking back on it, there was definitely pros and cons for both. I think we landed on the sedan predominantly because we wanted a high degree of performance, road capability. We wanted a high degree of efficiency. So the aerodynamic component was a big opportunity. And then, of course, the space concept, really being able to repackage the vehicle, shorter nose, longer cabin, get more space in a more reasonable size footprint of the vehicle. You get compound benefit there from an efficiency and range standpoint. And we just saw that if we want to show off EV excellence, the sedan format was a great place to start. Market dynamics evolve. Certainly the sedan segment has shrunk quite a bit, but we're performing really, really well in our category. So, there's two different ways to look at that. And I think the sedan has really helped us establish our core strength and our core ethos of what we're known for. So we're really proud and pleased with that.
So you basically, in the business world, it's called you caught a falling knife. However, while you were catching the falling knife, you were working on your new Vitamix blender.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
I'll let you use that material.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Giver.
Oh, it's going straight into the brand guidelines.
I've been in a couple programs with you, and I met some of the engineers, the Brits.
Yeah.
You have a lot of Jaguar Land Rover folks there.
JLR folks, some former Audi, Volkswagen people.
Okay.
Folks from all over. Well, Eric Bach is former VW Group.
The guy I spoke to, I forgot his name. Nice guy. Crazy car guy like you and I. He said to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the target was an M5, dynamically.
Dynamically, yes.
Yeah. Was that an early decision and we want that kind of dynamics, or was it after you've made this sedan decision and what the roller skate's going to be, this is what we can get to dynamically?
Yeah.
Where did that fit in?
I think, we are definitely all very much car enthusiasts at Lucid. And when I say car enthusiasts, I mean that we really value traditional automotive strengths, whether that's road holding, steering feel, braking feel, body roll, general vehicle dynamics, and how it feels to drive a car. We care about how a car drives. So the heritage of M5 and kind of this sports sedan dynamics was always there. I mean, that team within Lucid has a really powerful voice, and thank goodness for that. And you feel it in every version of the Air, and you even feel it. You really feel it in the Gravity, because they managed to take full advantage of kind of the benefits of electrification in terms of weight distribution and rolled holding and stability, but keep that traditional agility and tossability that you love from great sports sedans historically.
I was amazed they did that in the sedan with a non-air suspension.
Yeah.
Not the case in the Gravity, but I was blown.
And with good result too, so it was able to keep the car, keep some weight reduction and some complexity out of Air and still nail the driving dynamics and the livability of the car, because for some folks, a straight up IC sports sedan can also have its limitations on a daily experience, where Air it's really it's multifaceted depending on what drive mode you're in, and you really do see the difference, and it's so livable, for a commute, but you hit a canyon road and it's a lot of fun.
You know what I forgot to ask? At what point was the company named Lucid? Did they know going into it, or did you sit down and say, guys, I got this great idea? You never believed it.
All we knew is that Ativa was probably not going to be the name of the car company. And so I kind of came into the company knowing that. As we developed the business strategy, developed the overarching brand ethos and tone and personality and thinking, the naming procedure kind of went from there, and we brought in a firm to help us with that, because naming is far more like scary than designing the car, but at least for me, because then it's like naming your kid. You know what I mean? You know that this is gonna, it'll be stuck with them, and it's the same thing with.
Is that why Dean is not Poindexter?
Exactly why, and no new age stuff. You know, just solid. And in the case of Lucid, we'd been working on naming for about 6 months, and had gone through, I think, the 3rd round of names from our agency. And of course, we had surveyed employees, and you get a certain kind of names from the designers. You get a whole different range of names from the engineering, and it's really left brain, right brain. Like,
let me guess, a lot of numbers and letters and everything.
Like, hey, let's call it EV Max. You know, it's like, you know, and then the designers are doing stuff that is a lot more like kind of out there, and then there's a lot of debate between the two.
Can you
parties.
give us like 3 examples of funny ones?
I have a book of like the names,
and
it was just what it was is the naming coming from the engineering side of the company was just really pragmatic and very, very literal. Like, you know, like, let's call it Thunderbolt. You know, it's like, or let's call it, you know what I mean? And the designers were more like, it was abstract and
Boro or ALS or something like that. Yeah,
or Caldera, or like things that sounded like 70s like muscle cars and stuff like that, you know? And so
that's an interesting direction for an electric car.
Yeah, well, but in the end, that's not where we were headed. We wanted something that was a little bit more in the air, and there was like an intelligence, a clarity, a visionary tone to it, and you wouldn't even know it was a car company maybe when you first heard it, which I feel like when you think of technology companies or companies that are innovating, oftentimes the naming is a little bit more abstract, but there's always a connection, there's always a logic there. So when we heard, when Lucid was put in front of us, and I wish I could say that I came up with the name, but I didn't. And when they put it in front of us, this was after like tossing out so much stuff. I'm like, Lucid, you know, and it's a known word. Everybody's heard the word a million times, but when you really dig into the meaning, you're like, this is flipping perfect, you know? And again, controversial, like the left brain, right brain debate was intense, but I am so glad we stuck with that name, and it still works to this day.
So I wasn't aware that you kind of were one of the folks that started the company.
Certainly in terms of kind of, there was a period, several, but probably 6, 7, 8 months before I joined, that they started to formulate, we're going to do a car. Because Ativa was a battery company. They were doing batteries for hybrid buses. And then they made the decision and started seeking investment to become an actual ground-up car company. And then I joined several months after that. So in terms of like formulating the DNA of the company, and then even to date, a lot of those folks have moved on. So in terms of like being part of the original, the OG group, I'll take credit. At least be part of one of the early
That's a
folks.
huge step forward for a designer. Yeah. Whenever I'm friends with a lot of designers.
Yeah.
And you guys have this same annoying habit of anytime I try to give someone credit, like I tried to give you credit for the ND Miata. No, that was a team effort.
Well,
it's always
a team effort.
It's always a team.
Yeah.
But you were like, I feel this is a big step. This is huge honor on your part, where you came in as a guy that's got all this experience, and all of a sudden you're making brand level decisions and what the car should be. Should it be a car? Should it be an SUV? Yeah. That's unusual in a designer's career.
I mean, I think of all the aspects of leaving the security of a traditional car company, a big corporation, and going out and doing this, of all the aspects that I feel like are rewarding, it's that. It's having a chance to really sink into many aspects of the company versus just how the car looks, you know? And I think because ultimately the brand DNA and your market position and the customer you're going after informs what the car needs to look like. When you're at a traditional car company, you're being told, this is a customer, this is who we are, this is our past, don't screw it up. And this is our business strategy. You're told that. And so then you go and design accordingly.
So there weren't the layers that were, say, at a Volkswagen group.
Not at all.
That we need the backlight to be this angle.
Right.
No one came to you and said that.
No. None of that DNA was in place. Not aesthetically and not from a brand personality standpoint.
Was there any kind of maturity to it? Was there any like, okay, we need the wheels to be the wheelbase this much?
Once it was aligned that this is the format, meaning sport luxury sedan, that's when we started to get real about like, well, this is how long the wheelbase can be. This is how long how the diameter of the wheels. And
are you making that decision, or is there some product manager is doing it?
No, I'm doing that with the engineering team directly.
So it's all hands on deck.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
that's like the difference is you're not doing it as a committee or as this department's going to get together with this department. It's a startup. We're all in one room. Everybody is seeing the clay model. We're all doing this all together. Design got a little bit of breathing room in the early months to kind of formulate that strategy, play with proportions, play with wheelbase. We got straight into kind of vehicle architecture. How much seating space would there be? That's when you start to build the physical bucks, and you're going back and forth between CAD data, virtual. We were already into virtual reality at that point, and of course the clay model. And that all formulated literally within a matter of a couple of months. And then we nailed down the package architecture, and that was in 2016. So basically what we did in 2016 is the car that's driving around today. Keep in mind, we showed it.
Yeah.
Brought some awareness, got investor interest, and then we went on in a fundraising journey for almost 2 years.
So we're going to segue now. You guys, I think the audience knows I've featured your cars on the show before. I'm a big fan of yours. I also, little aside, I found another big fan of yours.
Oh, really?
And gave you,
There's more than
I sent
one?
it to you, a huge gift in the auto industry world.
Yes,
I gave you.
That's right.
Who is a big fan of your work?
It turns out the infamous Bob Lutz. What an honor.
Like
to hear that feedback come from him. That was huge.
The quote was, if you didn't have if you weren't beholden to General Motors, what car would you have without even thinking about it? Lucid.
I think the Lucid Air is a fantastic car. I've driven it. I love it.
Yeah.
I think it looks good. It drives great. 600-mile range. I mean, what's not to like?
I was like, man. And from a guy that I feel like knows cars.
Absolutely.
Knows what time it is.
He knows how the sausage is made.
Exactly. I mean, I was like, wow, that
and
is
he
cool.
Went on
I
and
felt
on
so
and on.
good about that.
I'm going to try to get my editor to put that one snippet
Package
so they can
in.
see.
That would be great.
And now you can see why you're glowing right now.
Yes, yeah. That was a wonderful a moment for me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it.
How much
Thanks
I love
for setting them up.
But to get to that point, this is where I feel you guys did something very different. I want to dive into this. You look at the landscape. There's a lot of startups out there. There were more previously. I feel like we're in that time in like the late teens, 100 years ago, where there were 300 car companies, and it kind of whittled down to like 50 and then 20. We're kind of at that point with EVs, especially over in China. However, that's a big function of where people got their money. A lot of startups, EV especially, got their money from China. You guys went in a completely opposite direction. Where did you get your money?
Well, in the early days, we were presenting the company to anyone who would listen,
Mm.
quite frankly.
Yeah.
You know, because
You got
that's
a checkbook, your money's green.
you know, and we felt qualified to be doing and talking about. We believed in what we were doing, but you can imagine there's only so many groups out there that can really help fund something like this to get it off the ground. It's very capital intensive and it takes a lot of time. And so we met with many investors over about a year and a half, 2-year period. And we met with a public investment fund of Saudi Arabia, which is PIF. It's the sovereign wealth fund for the country of Saudi Arabia. And that there was a real connection there because they were really looking for partners that could help get a brand off the ground. They wanted a company that had core technology and core knowledge and capability. They saw that we were already involved in Formula E racing, and they were very familiar with that. So that relationship and those early days, really, there was a strong connection there. Obviously, our ambition to be very mindful around energy efficiency, performance, certainly the early luxury positioning, I think, had an appeal to them, at least to get the company off the ground. And even our long-term ambition to be able to do manufacturing in North America, and with their help, even do it in Saudi Arabia, is obviously very appealing, especially given their ambitions and their goals around sustainability and growing their own economy. So there was just a really natural synergy, and oh man, they've been such tremendously great partners to help us evolve.
Incredibly patient.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So was there ever a debate inside, well, we need the money, but should we take it from Saudi Arabia? Because there was, famously, a bunch of folks didn't like the idea you got the money from Saudi Arabia. Was there ever that debate?
I don't think so. I think really this was about the relationship and discussing what the goals were. We had such common goals.
Yeah.
I think that's what it really came down to. And after meeting so many investors and so many different entities, I just felt like there was like a natural fit.
Yeah.
Honestly, it felt like a kind of destiny,
From the outsider's point of view, it, to me, is the linchpin event. It was that watershed event you guys had that got you to the point of being a successful car company. Meaning you put up a product, because if you look at many others that tried to compete with you, they got their money from China, couldn't get the money out of China for whatever reason. I can get smarter people than me to explain why. But by working with Saudi Arabia, I don't want to call it luck. I think that was the right strategic decision.
Yeah.
But I'm just one man.
I think it's the alignment of philosophy and what this means, not in a 1 year or a 2 year period, but how the industry as a whole is evolving from a technology standpoint, from a mobility standpoint, and from an energy standpoint. Like all of these things are tied together. And I think Lucid has the potential to be much, much more than a car company, just simply by our philosophy and our approach and our supporters.
Like, give me 3 examples. Like, what other businesses would you branch into?
Well, I mean, certainly the car itself, the technology that we excel at is really intrinsically tied to the drivetrain and how we approach energy efficiency, how we manage that efficiency, whether it be at home charging, the bi-directional capability that our cars have, and how that can influence how your charge time and your behavior for energy consumption or emergency energy for your home, drawing it off the vehicle. And then beyond that, we're really expanding into our autonomous drive technology, improving
So all
that.
related to the business of what Lucid already does. It's not like you would jump off into a completely separate, like the guy who founded Atari also owns Chuck E. Cheese's or founded Chuck E. Cheese.
I don't think it's that, but I would say in the space of mobility, and in our case, electric mobility. And then as soon as you're into electric mobility, you're into energy and energy management and monitoring energy and charging, home, fleet. How is that influenced? Now we have our relationship with Uber, so we're helping to equip Gravities for that for Uber's ride service that will be fully autonomous. And so you start to think about the broader experience of a mobility. And then you throw in the connected and digital ecosystem around that and what's possible there, especially as we're evolving into this era of AI. I think we can really excel in these areas. So there is some natural roadmap that's tied into this broader expectation of mobility, which has fingers in many directions.
Is any of this, whether it's the Uber relationship or getting into powering the home, that kind of, does any of this at odds with this luxury brand you've created?
I feel like the luxury position is the right place to start. And let's be honest, we're still not quite to the stage where electric vehicles are fully mainstream to all categories of buyers, right? And I think, and I'm just going to say this, I feel like there are a lot more affordable options out there, but they're still not as affordable as some gas options. And honestly, I would argue that there's good EVs. I believe that Lucid is a really great EV option. And I think there's some mediocre to not so good EVs out there. And I think that's influencing the perception of EVs and the ease of ownership of EVs as well. So by starting in the electric end, giving people an awesome across the board experience, I think that's the place to be. And as time evolves, as we think about our next products, the products I'm working on right now in the design studio, those are going to come down in price. They're going to move down market, but there's still going to be I would call it a premium positioning. We're not going all the way into kind of entry level. And over time, it will hit a much larger audience, and our audience will evolve, and I think that's an important part of it. And as we look into these other fingers of mobility, then it all starts to make sense.
Is there ever a discussion inside the company when you guys are making decisions like this? Hey, Mercedes is able to pull off being every taxi in Europe, but it's considered a luxury brand still alongside those taxis. Is there any learning from that?
Of course. Yeah. There's many examples of that where brands are able to span kind of mobility and fleet strengths.
How does a Mercedes get away with that? I never quite understood it.
Well, I just feel like it's a highly qualified, great experience as a cab versus perhaps, especially in their sedans, SUVs, and vans. So I think for Europe, they pull that off really well. The cars have a reputation of longevity and durability. And I would look at Lucid very similar, but with our EV strengths that are probably superior.
I think people would argue with you about the longevity of certain modern day Mercedes.
Well, you asked historically.
Historically,
this isn't
absolutely.
a new phenomenon. This is from the 80s. That was the case, and it's evolved ever since. Another example might be Yukons and Escalades.
Yeah.
That's a full-on black car service product.
Police car at this point.
Fleet vehicle that also holds real prestige to the consumer marketplace.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely possible, and the next wave of
it's a good example. I never quite thought about that.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's quite remarkable. And then if you layer in efficiency, low energy consumption, quiet, high quality ride experience, space and comfort, and then the connected experience, and then the autonomous experience, all areas we excel at, there's a certain logic to that connection.
I saw, just as an aside here, something we can geek out about. I was at the Bridge this past weekend. This fantastic, think of it as like a low-key quail for the East. And it's in Sag Harbor, New York. The highest point in Sag Harbor, we look down in Sag Harbor. This is where Billy Joel lives, in Sag Harbor. And they had, I think it was an 80 or a 79 280 TE station wagon with a manual transmission and the check seats.
Yeah, badass.
Oh my God.
Super cool. Yeah. A wagon, you said.
Oh my God, yeah. I'll show you the picture later.
Business.
Maybe I'll have my editor put it up.
I love that era very
much. My
much.
neighbor in London had a red one.
Okay.
With a sunroof, manual, and the tartan seats. I can't tell you how many times I tried to buy that car.
Those cars are so robust, the way they
it'll
were
never
built,
die.
Like the door handles and all the trim work and stuff. Bananas.
We got a Mercedes dealer right just over here by the airport, I can't tell how many flatbeds come in with those EQSs. I mean, they break themselves. Anyway, put them off the side. Let's talk SUVs a little bit. At what point did the team think, oh my God, we're catching a fallen knife, that the Air is great and Bob Lutz loves it, although you didn't know it at the time, but we needed to do an SUV? At what point were you thinking, we got to get moving?
Yeah, that was always the plan. Like literally, even though we had, I can remember the week we went all in on the sedan direction, it was always understood that the second product's going to be an SUV. That was not a debate at all. And that was going to...
And Saudi Arabia, the fund was, they bought into this. They're like, we think this is the sedan.
Our business plan
Yeah.
At that point. In fact, there were drawings and even some models of that stuff in the early days before we were even funded. So that was never up for debate. And that was obviously the next logical step after the sedan. So that was already the case. And we had already made those plans and had been thinking about that from platform evolution.
So there was never a panic of, oh my God, yeah, we knew it was going in the SUV crossover direction, but wow, now it's accelerated.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a panic. It was part of the strategy. Would we have liked to been able to do the Air, get it into market and more quickly turn around and put the SUV out faster? Yes. Mm-hmm. Nothing ever moves as fast as you would hope, especially in these early days as you're kind of building up the organization and all of that. So, that was without question always the plan. Yeah.
For the audience, the audience is a combination of major car geeks, some business folks. What was the difference in funding levels to just show a concept and say, this is what we'd like to build, and then that second or third round of, here, we already got a concept, now we want to make 25,000 copies a year in a factory? What's the difference in numbers, in money, that you needed to do that?
Gosh. I mean, to do a proof of concept in those early days, you were talking about a few $100 million to do the proof of concept, to build prototypes,
wow,
build up your technologies, prove that it's possible. Because you can make a show car but we had, our first prototypes were real cars.
Yeah.
They weren't concept cars. And so, once you got that through and built that up, a few $100 million to get a car and build a factory and get launched. Now you're into billions, and that's
5, 3, 10.
I can't specify. I'd rather not.
Because it's scary.
Well,
what they don't know is you used to have hair before you started.
Exactly. Yeah. It's in an order of tenfold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the folks at like a Toyota or a Mazda, they'll tell you readily, it's $5 billion for a new car, like a totally new car.
Totally.
Just even a mid-cycle refresh is $1 billion.
Yeah. And then when you're talking about building up factories and supply chains and retail outlets, we did this over a period of years, and we started very small and with a minimum footprint, and then we just expanded over time. So that's been, it does add.
Yeah.
It does add up.
So when we start talking about now a commercial endeavor, the Air, I remember we talked about some of the numbers when we first sat down, and you didn't hit the original targets, but the car was selling. The Air was selling. But now you got the Gravity out. And where is that in terms of like the difference in sales figures between the Air and the Gravity? Because now the car is actually out in dealers.
I think over time, the addressable market is several times what the sedan addressable market is. So, the potential for Gravity to get up there in higher volumes in the...
But are you seeing that? I think you're seeing
certainly
like
seeing the early demand for the car
is way more than...
Oh yeah, definitely in the early stage, and we're just now kind of launching the campaign for the car, bringing awareness for the car. So I feel like there's a lot of demand in that category because it's just more a product. It's like you know, it has the Gravity is a really good example of what I would call a primary household vehicle. So it's a vehicle that can do whatever the household needs it to do really, really well, whether that's space, utility, gear, kids, pets, whatever, road trips. You know, it can do it all. And as you can imagine, it's an exponential demand for a product like that versus a luxury sedan, which is usually one of many cars in that consumer's household, you know. And I think it's just a much bigger,
Have you been
broader
able to like
market.
quantify? Like, is it double the demand of the Lucid Air, or
I
is it?
mean, we're in the middle of that right now. So certainly the early orders and the response to the car has been amazing. Our biggest thing is the production ramp right now. So we won't know fully until, and I obviously got to watch what I say with respect to kind of quarterly earnings and whatnot.
Totally understand. Production's an interesting thing. I don't know if you know this about me, but I am a proud Arizona State Sun Devil.
Yes, you've mentioned that before.
Just a couple of times.
Yes.
How does this come into our discussion of Lucid?
I mean, you know, our other big partner, I think, for helping to get Lucid off the ground has been the state of Arizona, you know, and they've been tremendous from day one. You know,
You're welcome.
You can imagine as we were trying to figure out where the car would be produced. We looked at a lot of different locations around North America, all over the place, and I think Arizona won that by a long shot. And that had a lot to do with,
What were three others that were in the bake-off?
you know, we were looking at South Carolina. I think we had some spots in Texas, Michigan, you know, some combination of North and South.
And why did Arizona win?
I think it was several things. It was the proximity to our headquarters in California, the affordability and accessibility of land. But above all of that, it was the support of the state. You know, at the time it was Governor Ducey, and
Fascinating guy.
yeah, very
I
much
think
so.
he was, wasn't he Cold Stone? He was like the CEO of Cold
exactly.
Stone Creamery. Yeah,
That's right.
So the ice cream man helped you start your car company.
You know, but it was just the state had and still very much has a strong view on how to let businesses grow and attracting business to the state, and also even the support from a education standpoint and a ready population for employees. We just felt like we had a real partner in that, and it's been fantastic.
Was it the South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, very famous for the incentives that they give car manufacturers, which is, we're going to give you a tax package that lowers your tax burden for 10 years so you can hire more of South Carolinians.
Yeah.
Did Arizona do that?
Well, certainly they made it attractive for us to come there. You know, every state does that, and that's part of the consideration that goes into that. So, you know, I can't speak to the detail or to what extent they were versus others. I think honestly, I think it was as a holistic approach, and again, like everything, it's like they really wanted us there. Everything just kind of lined up, you know, the proximity and even the spaces that's available out there, the land that's available.
Where is the factory again?
It's in between. It's in Casa Grande.
I know where Casa Grande. Yeah.
So it's kind of sort of positioned between Phoenix and Tucson, so people can come in to work in that area from multiple locations. It's easy to get in and out. Phoenix and of course Arizona's amazing. You know,
I mean, again, I'm ridiculously biased. There's another aspect to it which I will say, because I am involved with the university still, and I help through the alumni group, like some advisory stuff. There is an unusual, there's an educated population there. I mean, that's just the way to put it. The endowment of research that we have at Arizona State is second to none. And I'd put it up against the most famous universities you could think of that have Ivy on the doors. And as a result, it produces a lot of people, engineers, architects, you name it. And as a result, it's attracted not just you guys. Like I don't want to call it a Silicon Valley, but there is a huge high-tech population that's there.
Yeah, and that's been the vision
Yeah.
they set out to put in place, and so as a result, you have Intel's out there.
Was TSMC a thing when you were making your
No,
decision?
that hadn't
But
happened
Intel was
yet.
already there, but
Intel
not
was already
TSMC.
underway. Of course, you have several aerospace companies setting up there, so it's a combination of manufacturing and R&D. So I just feel like they're doing it right. They're attracting the right kind of
No, I'm a
business
big
out
fan,
there,
yeah.
and they have great momentum. It's super exciting. That whole corridor that I mentioned where we are, there's stuff being built all over the place, and I think these are the kind of companies and this is the kind of growth we need in the US, especially the technology side of things. And Lucid's right smack in the middle of it all. Yeah.
Was there a debate? Because if you think about it, South Carolina offers the same kind of tax incentives. No shade on South Carolina. I don't think it has the same like tech research focus that Arizona does, but they have the advantage of they have a lot of suppliers there because they're supplying BMW, Mercedes, Hyundai, Kia. Was that a problem for you guys when you were setting up?
I mean, at the time we were setting up, we knew that many of our suppliers are based in Mexico and their automotive supply chain. And so that works
So it was
really
a
well.
non-factor.
Yeah, it was a non-factor. I think that's something that as we grow, also suppliers are drawn to that area. So I think I think making Arizona a bit more of a hub for this type of thing. Obviously, we're excited to be part of that.
Oh, I'm going to build a house out there. I'm already looking for land.
Good for you.
And you said it was affordable? No.
Well,
it's no longer affordable.
Yeah, but then there's new areas.
Yeah.
But obviously Scottsdale
and I just love it out
and
there. It's
Fords
magnificent.
have gotten it's like Malibu, it's kind of crazy. But
you bought your house in Malibu for 2 cents.
So many areas and parts, it's a pretty sprawling landscape now.
Yeah.
And there's so many beautiful areas all just within that whole region. Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. And we've talked a lot about, you sound like a VC at this point. Like I remember you back in the day when you were just a guy sketching cars, and now you could be part of Kleiner Perkins.
Well, things have evolved a little bit. This is what happens when you take on a project like this. It's a real school of lessons.
Let's
learned.
walk through your background. I think the folks who don't know should know kind of where you went, but also you have some unusual highlights along the way. So let's start. You were a surf kid in Huntington Beach and go from there.
Yeah, I grew up in Huntington Beach, Orange County. That's where my parents set up when they got married. And, we were probably 2 or 3 miles from the ocean, so it was like bikeable and but back then, like from 10 years on, you're riding your bike to the beach, and
I took the subway to school.
Yeah,
so screw you.
There you go, But, when you grow up in it, I mean, we were definitely fortunate, but it was still kind of a middle-class area, But, man, those are some great beaches along there, the state beaches of Huntington.
Magnificent.
And the city beaches along
Bolsa Chica there and everything.
Yeah, and Newport Beach, Laguna Beach.
Newport, come on now.
Yeah, that's all just prime Orange County surfing. And
all of us here at MotoMan are super excited to not only have the podcast back, but for it to be its own show. And there we look to you for a little assistance. Can you help us grow the show? 2 really easy ways to do that. First and foremost, if you're reaching out via YouTube or other streaming platforms, you click on subscribe, notifications, or more importantly, share these episodes with your friends, especially on Reddit. Now, if you're downloading these episodes, listening via podcast platforms, we'd ask you to rate us. The good stars are wonderful, but leaving a written review would be even better, especially sharing who was your favorite guest. So with that, I am incredibly grateful for your assistance in help growing this. And now, back to the episode.
So I grew up kind of from 10 years old on, just going to the beach a lot. And then that evolved into boogie boarding and then surfing. And then that just became one of the things I was super into. The other thing that was nice about Orange County is, and just Southern California in general, it's just a car mecca, and Orange County was just like prime European import car scene in the 80s. I grew up, my dad was into air-cooled Volkswagens, so we had like this Baja Bug, and he had a Chevy 10 van with the Krager wheels and the whole deal, and I just grew up around that. grew up loving mostly European and import cars, and you know, started working on my own Volkswagens and stuff like that. And so like kind of the surf beach culture and just like the love of cars, really, in hindsight, I see that drastically influenced like what I love, you know, the stuff that I love. And that's when, you know, I realized like, man, it would be great if I could do something. I knew I wasn't going to be a professional surfer. That I knew, because it's like, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. You've tried, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but that wasn't going to happen. But car design came calling, and I found out that was a career. I found out that through one of my teacher slash athletic instructors told me about Art Center College of Design. He's like, you love cars, and you should check out this school. They teach you about car design. And so I went to the school. My mom drove me there. I think I was still 15 at the time. And literally, I remember that day. It was like, okay, I saw the kids doing drawings and working on the clay models, and the history of that school was pretty remarkable in terms of the success of folks that went, designers that went through there. And that was it. I was like, okay, I'm doing this, and I really poured all my energy towards that kind of dream, even though, I mean, it's probably as rare as being a professional surfer. It's like not that many people actually get
like
into
getting on
car
the
design.
NBA.
Yeah, I was just really fortunate, but you know, focusing in on that goal early on, and I was fortunate, really fortunate.
So you went to Art Center, and then two interesting things happened at Art Center. Number one, you did an internship in Germany, and number two, you valet park cars.
Yes,
Which
yeah.
both things changed your life.
Both things had a big impact on me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So when I moved, once I got accepted to Art Center, I moved up to Glendale, Pasadena area by the Rose Bowl, where the school is located. And I did that 6 months prior to my semester starting. And then I took a valet job to kind of, because I like cars, right? And so that was at a nice restaurant in Glendale. And yeah, very nice young lady came through, and I parked her. It was actually her friend's car, and I don't know. Somehow we got chatting, and she's been my wife for 28 years.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that
and
was.
went to Germany with you.
She did. She moved to Germany when I started work at Audi. Yeah.
So you did an internship at Audi or
Well, I did an
Volkswagen?
internship at Porsche.
Oh, I knew I didn't like you for a reason.
Yeah, that was my first internship, and then I had my second internship was with Volkswagen and Audi. Yeah.
Yes. And there were some, at Audi, when you started at Audi, you did some unusual projects there. What were those?
During at Audi and Ingolstadt in my professional, my first, well, that's crazy. I started there in January, February of 1994, which was kind of a low point for Audi, to be honest, at least from a consumer.
They were still getting out of the unintended acceleration at that point,
And Volkswagen Group in general was going through a lot of change, but that was still the Piëch era, and Ferdinand Piëch, and we had a great project that had kicked off, which later became the Audi A2, which was a very unusual kind of, I would call it really an advanced R&D type of project where you're...
Oh, it was literally a science experiment.
Yeah, it was an aluminum space frame, more of a compact city car, had to be super, super efficient, aerodynamic, lightweight, and yet spacious, not unlike a kind of Lucid approach type of project. So that taught me a lot about kind of aerodynamics, efficiency, clean European, specifically German design.
And was it your sketch that became the car?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and
I
you
worked
were like
on that.
24.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was a trial by fire, you know. My boss at the time, Jay Mays, he had...
Who ran Ford Design for many years.
Exactly, yeah. That came later, yeah. And Freeman Thomas was there. He was working on the Audi TT at the same time. So it was an exciting time. And that was also a time where I saw Audi go from kind of real challenging position from a brand identity standpoint, and kind of the quality of the cars at that stage, and what it became in the coming 10 years was super impressive. And to like witness that, because, you know, I was just one tiny piece of that, but the talent that was there, the ambition to really rise up and take on the likes of Mercedes and BMW. I mean, Audi came a long way during that time.
Didn't you work on the livery for Hurley Haywood's Audi car, the one he did?
I didn't know.
No. Anyway, you then came back and worked in the Advanced Studio in Santa Monica.
That was in Simi Valley at the time.
Simi Valley, okay.
That was where the original Southern California design studio was, in Simi Valley. That was, so I came back and went to work there, first with Volkswagen, first with Audi, continued with Audi, and then eventually changed over to Volkswagen full time. And during that time, then I was managing the studio, and we did some great concepts. The microbus concept was one of our key projects.
Didn't you do the new Beetle?
The new Beetle was prior, under Jay and Freeman. That was before I moved to Ingolstadt. So
but isn't there there's a watercolor?
There's a painting
of you next to the Beetle.
That's right. Yeah. In the Beetle.
In the Beetle.
Yeah. In the new. So that was called the Concept 1. Concept 1 was the new Beetle concept car. And I was in the car, in the painting. That painting's by an artist by the name of John Marsh. And it had all of the people that worked on there. And it's like Freeman's in that painting, Jay's in that painting, Franz is in that painting. I'm in that. It's like
the
when I
Beatles
look
made a
back,
car.
I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, but it's funny to look back, because I mean, it was just fortunate to come, you know, intern and then come out of school and work with such talented like mentors and colleagues alike. And that was
so
just
you did
those
work
guys.
on the new Beetle.
Yeah, but I was doing like, Franz and I were like, oh, here, work on this door handle or work on that.
Hubcap duty.
Yeah, we were doing the Freeman and Jay and a gentleman by the name of Craig Durfee. They were the primary designers on the car, and kind of conceived the whole project. And we were like the young designers just helping out. And so we got to work on a bunch of details, and we're just fortunate enough to be part of that project, because that became such a big deal. And funny enough, when the first production cars came over to the U.S. after the car went back to Wolfsburg, got productionized, they started building it. I was able to get one of the first production cars, and that's what Connie and I went to the wedding in, which is pretty cool.
So you got married in your own car.
Yeah, which is like, that was pretty cool. And I like all the wedding pictures and stuff are around the new Beetle, and that was a cool project.
Oh, you're gonna have to show me that. I've never seen those pictures.
They're really cool pictures, like black and white, and and the car had literally, it was still in that stage where like if you drove down the street, people would like lose their minds when they saw it. You know, it was so new and unusual at that time.
Yeah. My girlfriend at the time, she had one, and it was black. She called it Bisha.
Yeah.
That was what she called it.
Everybody named their cars back then.
I still name my cars.
Totally.
But not Bisha. At what point did you come back to the U.S. and run the studio here?
That was, I moved back in like late 97, early 98. Yeah.
And how long were you there?
In Germany?
No. Well, yeah, in Germany, and then
well, I was in Germany for
Monica.
about 4 years. And then when I moved back to Simi Valley, I stayed with the company through the 90s into all the way to 2009. And that was it was part Audi, mostly Volkswagen. And then 2000, and during that period, we moved the studio from Simi Valley to Santa Monica, to the airport there in Santa Monica.
Good choice.
Was super cool.
Yeah, especially for someone who lived in Malibu.
A real step up for us, and that was still a split studio, but it was we were calling at the time Volkswagen Group, and that included Volkswagen and Audi and Ducati, and it was like all the brands within the group were.
I didn't ask. Was there anything at Porsche during your internship that you worked on that was of note?
No. You
just got to work.
I was still really young at that time. I met some great, talented designers. Grant Larson, who designed the original Boxster, among other things, and Ken Okinawa from Pininfarina, and He designed the Enzo, and I'm like sitting next to these guys, and that was just like real.
Pretty cool.
I mean, that internship was like transformative.
Is
Yeah.
the French guy, is he still running that VW studio now? The guy that loves the 928s?
Oh,
Scott,
Gael, yeah, he's still
Yeah.
running the Audi studio in
Fascinating
Malibu.
guy.
Yeah, Gail's,
He like, I think he has so many 920s, he's lost them.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he hides
And
them
he
in
lost
garages
some
in
cars in the
France.
fire as well.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay, so
unfortunately.
this is a good segue.
Yeah.
I think we have to, the flag at half-mast. You did, I'm sorry to hear, you did lose your home. And it wasn't just like, oh, I bought a house in Malibu. You guys, when you were in your salad days, you bought yourself a condo, you refurbished it yourself, you sold it, made a couple of bucks, bought a house by the beach, and you designed it, and your own two hands, you built that house. Gone.
Yeah, that was a drag. I mean, Malibu is it's like a really susceptible to the wildfire thing, and it's one of those things that you can't be naive to, and we never were, but over the years we had kind of worked our way up, as you mentioned, and that house was a full renovation. We took it, gutted it, and redid the whole thing, and it was not extravagant. It was kind of, but it was still a cool place.
It was
and we were
very under
super
the
proud
radar.
of
It was
yeah.
don't let them see you coming.
Yeah, it was.
You had to go through and see the details. It was very it wasn't mid-century modern. It wasn't that. It was just something that, it was kind of like you look at a woman who's very attractive, and the more you look at her, you're like, oh my God, you're really good looking. It was kind of like that.
I mean, it had nice bones and had a good roof line.
Yeah, and the view was great.
The view was great. We had lots of garage space, which of course is the most important thing. So
that's why I
good.
wanted to bring this up.
Yeah.
So you, over the years, have had good cars.
I
Why don't
have
we
had
give us a
bunch of
little
good
car
cars.
resume that led you up to what you had to that point before we give away what happened there?
Yeah. So I had growing up, like I mentioned, I had a bunch of air-cooled Volkswagens, mostly Beetles, and VW things. I had a couple of VW things. We had Vanagons, and several Euro vans. I like all the van stuff. Lamborghini Espada, early Lotus Esprit, not the one I have now, but an early one, and 993 Porsches. So a lot of just I like kind of went through some of the ugly ducklings like VW things, and then the real classics.
That's
like
purposely handsome.
It
though.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's quirky and unusual.
Ride quality is garbage, but other than that, I love them.
Yeah, and I loved the 993.
Oh, yeah, that silver one, I
That
think?
was just an epic car. But I always wanted to kind of build up a kind of another air-cooled Volkswagen, like a thing or a old bus, and I settled on this idea of doing a Myers-Manx and really building it up from scratch. And I had done we had done a concept car and that was kind of a little bit of a buggy tribute called the Concept T at Volkswagen, and it was I was in peak like buggy fever, and that was like probably around
Oh, I remember that thing.
2004,
You got to get me a
2005.
picture of that so I can put it up.
It's
The concept, it was like a
T.
crossblade kind of
Exactly,
a deal. Oh,
red,
it was badass.
super cool. Like, it was like a coupe buggy, and super cool project. And it was at that point I'm like, I'm building a buggy, and so I built this thing from scratch. I worked with a good friend of mine, Bob Wake, and another gentleman up Northern California that builds these tube chassis, so you don't have to use the old VW pan, and just use the suspension front and rear. Built this thing up over like a 4-year period. It was like a hobby project, lots of favors, and it was kind of I would call it like a rally cross street rod Myers-Manx buggy,
I never could put my finger on this thing, but now I can.
Yeah.
And being that we're in Torrance, California, you can understand why I say this. If Singer were to make a Myers-Manx, that's the car.
Kind of close to something
and
like
even
that.
all the carbon fiber, it's
Yeah.
it had the gas cap in the
Yeah.
center, just like a
Yeah.
Singer does. Like you should sue their ass. They stole your idea.
Well, maybe I took it from even older Porsches
Yeah.
than Singer Porsches, but that whole point of that car was like, take all the cool like SoCal stuff that I like and mash it all up into like this nostalgic / semi-modern statement, and And it was great. It was great. I just used to tear around Malibu, PCH, canyon roads. It was a lot of fun to drive. But yeah, that was it was a super cool project.
Okay, so this is where we get to the sad part of the story. Explain to us what happened.
Yeah, so that night, the fires came through. My son was down at the house, and I was still up north at Lucid, and he was able to move some the other cars out, the ones that were easier to move. We moved. We were about a quarter mile down the road from Nobu, and he moved all those cars to Nobu. But this is like now fires really. You could see it coming, and I'm like, listen, don't worry about it. Get out of there, and just kind of hoped that, like, because we'd been through other fires, and we just always dodged that bullet, and but not this time. Yeah, it took out the house late at night, and the chassis, the motor, everything was just molten metal.
It was shocking because I go past your house every time I go to shoot cars, and my road's past your house. It was shocking to see a house that I've been in and seeing, like, you took me through and showed me the work you did at that house, and just to see basically retaining walls. That's all that's left.
Yeah. It burns everything. Like when you see the motor block gone, the transmission gone, your refrigerator, like everything is gone.
Have you noticed that they left, someone has I think it's a 996 and the Cayenne right next to each other?
Why they haven't hauled that away yet. I don't know what.
It's kind of morbid, but of course I had to take a picture of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll put that up in this episode.
Yeah.
But
it sucks. I mean, it's tough, obviously, to lose your house and stuff you care about.
Yeah.
But you realize, like, I had a lot of crap I didn't need also. You know what I mean?
Changes your life,
It cleanses that. But I lost a lot of, like, especially like professional stuff. I had a lot of work. I had sketches from college. Unfortunately, I lost.
What about the
that.
wedding pictures with the Beetle?
We have all of that.
You still got that.
We had the go boxes, fortunately, of photos and documents and some memorabilia.
See, people don't understand what it's like to live in California.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful place 99% of the time, and can bite you,
I do think you are giving the management of this state a bit of a pass. I mean, that was
for sure.
That was an abuse of how to prepare for.
Yeah, I definitely feel
wildfires.
like there's a lack of preparedness, and there are issues surrounding that. But also, I know the history quite well, and I mean, there's just a history of really, really powerful wind-fueled fires that go through the Santa Monica Mountains. That's not a new thing. It's been going on for as long as there's been a population here. And you can, I know the Malibu history really, really well. And if you know how many times the fires have burned through and how powerful they've been, part of it is just you have to assume the risk. I'm just taking more the attitude of like, okay, we're going to rebuild. We're going to build back more fortified and better and more careful with what we build with and how we build and how close you let the trees get to the house and all of those things, and just be more. I think everybody has to be more prepared and take it on themselves, and then demand more from our
municipalities. There's a great
example.
What's his name? Rick
Caruso.
Rick Caruso.
Yeah.
His mall still stands there because of the way he built it.
Yeah.
And he had a private fire security that was on staff and prepared the right way.
Yeah.
It's what a stark contrast this was.
But also there's good examples throughout Palisades and in Malibu of homes that are not necessarily built with the traditional Southern California timber-based things, and took more precautions with the types of windows they use, the vents they use, how they design the awnings to not have fire-prone, how they handle landscaping, fencing, keeping that away from the house. I've learned a lot in this process, and I feel like maybe I was a little bit too casual about those topics in hindsight, and so I think there are homes that simply survived when a lot of others didn't, just because of those precautions. And you have to think, it's like if it's one thing if out of 10 homes that are close to each other, one of them is fortified like that. But if the majority are, those you know, because it's the house next to you that catches your house on fire, that catches the next house on fire, you know? And now if all the homes have been built with more fire resistance, none of them catch on fire. Or if one does, it's just a fluke, you know? And it's just, when you see rows and rows and rows of houses, wood homes that have gone up, it's...
Are you seeing I know we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but are you seeing an efficiency, a priority given to you guys to get permits back, to move faster, to rebuild faster than the normal California melees in this area?
I wish I could say definitively yes, but that's not been my experience so far.
Even up, we're 9 months past it.
Yeah, that's not been my... I feel like in the case of Malibu, it's a fairly small town, and the sheer volume of homes that now need to get rebuilt is quite big. So I think the planning area, and it's a bit overwhelmed, and I just don't see that it's moving yet.
The impetus isn't there yet.
Yeah, it's just not. And
have they taken at least the Coastal Commission away?
is
there a bypass for that?
The governor has waived the Coastal Commission as being part of that rebuild process, assuming you build like for like, plus the parameters you're allowed. And so that is, that's a big plus, but it's all the prep work getting into that. It's not like you just go down to the planning office and say, okay, this is what my house was. Can you stamp this so I can start building? It just doesn't work. There's so many things you need to do, so much prep you need to do to get into that, and everything is weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks.
Are you going to do the same thing you did last time, where you actually had a hand in making?
Oh yeah. No.
So you're still going to get involved.
No, basically what I want to do, but I still work with a really good architect, and we're trying to plan it out, get the most out of it. Also to really, you know, if we can make adjustments, and I know what the weaknesses were of the prior home, because that was a pretty old house, old floor plan. And so we're looking at how we can improve on that, utilize.
Are you going
to
try to rebuild what it looked like, or are you going to try to make it look different?
Right now, the plan is to preserve that kind of low A-frame pitch that the house had. So there's some like remnants or visual reference of what was there before, because I like that look. It is kind of mid-century but updated. And so we're trying to preserve that basic look, but reorient the flow of the rooms and the layout in space in the backyard, because it was a decent sized lot. And we're trying to see how to better lay things out, take advantage of the square footage that we're allowed. Yeah.
So let's talk about a little positive here. One of the cars that came out of that garage is special.
Yes,
one of the cars
special.
that survived was very
and
special.
And that was a bit of a Sophie's choice thing too, because I could have moved the Manx first, but I chose to have my son move this first.
And what is this?
So this is a 1977 Lotus Esprit S1. It's an early car and many people don't know this, but the early Lotus Esprits, I don't know, it was the first several hundred, were not painted like traditional cars are painted. They're like a boat. The color goes into the mold first, then the fiberglass. And so when it comes out of the mold, it's the color.
They have all the build quality of a boat from back then,
well,
too.
that too. It's built like a bayliner, you know? So it's like literally made like a boat. And but that's just super cool. The car's like, you can scratch the car and the gel coat's got thickness, you know, like a boat does. And it's just a completely original car. I bought it from technically the third owner, and it's a time capsule. It's just a pure time capsule. I think I have now 5,000 miles on it. That's original mileage.
You've put on it?
No, I've only put 1,800 miles on it since
I wasn't aware it had such low miles.
It's super low miles. Yeah.
I remember you bought it through Amelia Island, right?
The concourse.
The Gooding auction,
Yeah. Broad Arrow.
The Broad Arrow auction, yeah. But what's so fascinating about your car, and very few people get to see this kind of stuff, like the car now is somewhat valuable, but for the longest time, they were worth 3 cents.
That's right, yeah.
And we could pay, like, I'll make it up, 67 Eldorado.
Yeah.
Beautiful design, right?
Absolutely.
You know, Bill Mitchell, stunning design, but you can't afford to restore one of those.
Right. That's right.
And when you see one that's perfect, you're like, oh my God, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Even if you're not into Cadillacs,
Right.
that's your Lotus.
Yeah. But my car is not restored.
It's
That's
so
what's so
stunningly
crazy
beautiful
about it. It's like, it has all the Lotus like imperfections.
Absolutely.
Because that's just the way they were.
Mhm.
But as far as those things go, I mean, a car, can't live that long and be any more preserved than that is. Especially Lotus, those kind of cars are so fragile and so delicate.
That's a
and
wonderful way to put
It
it.
is fragile.
They are very fragile.
It's just the way it's built is super lightweight, super minimal, and the materials are really nice if they're in good condition, but they deteriorate really badly with sunlight, it has all this like fine textile on the seats, and then there's this like crushed velour that they made the instrument panel out of,
Very
which
70s.
I freaking love. It's like a cigar lounge. Which can influence design, and that's what that it felt like, and all of that has stood the test of time. There are days when I'm like, I don't want it to sit in the sunlight too long, because all the cars I've ever seen like that are just that stuff just turns to dust.
Oh, then the dashboard cracks.
Exactly.
Now, you got it. It was in beautiful shape when you got it, but then you did some work to it, specifically this unique work that only someone that works at a car company could do.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing I did is it was so original. It still had its federalized front and rear bumpers. So these, back then, this is when cars had to go through pretty big differences for bumper regulation and emissions, and so it had these god awful big clunky bumpers, which was really common in these kind of wedge era from the 70s and 80s. They did this to the Countach and some of these other cars. They put these big blocks of slabs of bumper on them, and it was just awful. And so the rear bumper, it redid the whole rear end valance exhaust system. And then the front bumper, there wasn't a good replica of that bumper. So that one, I had the car scanned. I kind of had the data remodeled so it was really accurate to the original European bumper, and had that grafted on. So now it's a really good visual example of what.
Not to get you in trouble with HR, but was this scanning done in Lucid?
It wasn't. No, I did
Okay.
all that with my colleagues here in Southern California. Not an official Lucid project by any means.
So an important note here. I want to remind you of a conversation you and I had. As car geeks do, we got together on a Sunday. We had breakfast. I brought my car. You brought your car. We drove the canyons together. And I made a request to you. What was that request?
That I think you wanted to put it on your show.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I want to go down on record that I can drive the car and shoot it on my show.
Yes, you can shoot it on your show. Oh, you want to drive it?
Well, I got to drive it to put it on the show.
Yeah, of course. We'll figure it out.
So now the audience knows. Now it's legal tender. If you pull back, I'll sue your ass.
Is that how this friendship
That's how this works, exactly.
Working? Okay.
Yeah. So we did a huge weave here. I mean, we did like 8 weaves. But let's get back to your career. You went to where? Mazda.
Yeah, Mazda.
Why did you go to Mazda?
Well, Mazda, even though I was broadly speaking really into European cars and specifically German cars, I always just loved Mazda. I can remember the first time I saw a Miata on the road when it first came out. This was like 1989. I saw it on the 405 freeway in Orange County. And I've just always thought it's such a cool company. And that opportunity came up. This was, and it happened to coincide with when Ford and Mazda separated. If you recall, basically they were under Ford control for I don't know, 10 years. I'm not sure exactly. And I had several colleagues working there, and it just seemed like this is the perfect time. And I was ready for something else. And man, it was really one of my most enjoyable periods anywhere. There was a real sense of global camaraderie during that time with Mazda. The Japanese team, the American team, and the European team were really like in lockstep about what we wanted to achieve. And at the time, it was a whole new product cycle coming out. So there was new platforms, there was new motor technology, Skyactiv technology, and then they wanted to refresh the design direction with a whole new design direction. So it was like we had the next 5 years all planned out, and also Mazda wanted to partly reposition the brand. So they went from kind of the Zoom era, if you remember, which was really fun, sporty cars, but a little bit kind of like cheap and cheerful, to something a little bit more alluring and enticing from a visual standpoint, more dynamic, a little bit more imposing, but still this kind of warm-blooded vibe that you feel from Mazda historically. And that's what we focused on. Started with Mazda 6, Mazda 3, CX-5, CX-9, and of course the Miata. Yeah.
What percentage is that? So most of the audience, I think, understands, they've been watching for a while, that these things are a collaborative effort amongst different design studios, but there is a bake-off. Like the European studio will put in a sketch, you'll put in a sketch, Japan will put in a sketch, and ultimately the theme is chosen from one studio for the exterior and then another theme for the interior. What percentage of time was Irvine winning these sketch bake-offs?
Gosh,
for Mazda?
it really just depends. I think when I first got to that studio and we started doing the first proposals, I can confidently say what we were doing was having a big influence in Japan, because I was coming off at it a little bit, maybe more from a European standpoint. And I think that was like, oh, wow, this looks upmarket, and I think that was influential at the time. So that guided a lot of direction. We would do proposals, and then they would sometimes take those themes and graft it onto their directions. Other times it was more like we did the whole thing, like the CX-9 was that type of product where basically we almost finished the car in North America, and then they just did the last refinements for production. And like the MX-5 was like a mixed bag. There was a lot of influence from our early direction, but still held a basic line from their direction. And more importantly, I think with something like the Miata project, just like, what do we want this car to be discussion, we had a lot of influence on that, whether it was going to be more nostalgic and retro, or it was going to be a more modern performance statement, which I think it became with ND. And that served that project. It was time for that kind of update, I feel. And then our studio really excelled at interior design. And so a lot of those interiors just went straight into the
One of the things that
projects.
always stood out to me about the ND was bringing in the body color on the door panel.
Yeah.
It was Julian. I think that was
Julian
his idea.
Montese, yeah. This comes from
I
him.
thought that was genius. And I just recently, I don't shoot a lot of Mazdas these days, because I've changed the mix of the cars on the show, kind of gotten away from the nondescript crossovers. So I got a 35th anniversary ND.
Nice.
Got the color.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
The new red is unbelievable.
And it's
so
got the tan
powerful.
interior and a tan top.
Yeah.
And it really accentuates that one design that you guys put in from Irvine. And I think that's my second favorite thing in that studio. My first favorite thing is, who helped you build SEMA cars back in the day?
Well, I don't want to give too much credit, but you were present.
Present.
No, you turned a wrench or two for sure.
Turned a wrench. I painted cars, man.
That's
You put me to work.
right, yeah.
We were pulling all-nighters.
Those SEMA projects were a lot of fun.
Super fun.
Yeah.
That, what is it? That was the Thunderhill, the 25 hours of Thunderhill
Yeah,
car we
had
did?
that, and then I think you were around for the, I think, what was it called? The Super 20?
Oh yeah, I was around for the Super
which
20.
was was this
cool.
NC, modified NC,
Yeah.
Miata with a hard top, widened fenders,
Mhm.
supercharged. That was a cool project.
Yeah.
That was a super cool project.
I was
But-
always thankful to you, because you gave me access to the basement.
Yeah, the basement
And that has
Mazda
all the good
studio
stuff,
is
all the heritage
insane.
stuff.
Yeah, it has all the rotary race cars.
Yeah.
It's a treasure trove of like history.
Did you see this year at Quail? They had one of the two 787Bs.
That's right. They started it up.
Oh, I wasn't there when they started
they
up.
cranked it up.
Now I'm jealous.
Which is just like insane. Yeah.
So have you ever sat down with Miata-san, and does he look at you like you and Franz like, you guys screwed me?
No, I mean,
You left me. You
yeah,
became electric car aficionados.
yeah, he knew that. I mean, Miata-san is great, and
Amazing
I
dude.
mentioned that it was such a good time to work. It was like there was a real. That's why I don't like to say, "Oh, we designed this and they designed that." It was just good teamwork, more so than I'd ever experienced in a big car company, and he just curated that kind of teamwork. There was a real like, let's just get the most out of every project.
You know, it's funny. You talk to a lot of folks in car companies, and you get a lot of like media training. That's kind of like, oh yeah, what's the team? But you gotta say there's something going on with Miata-san's tutelage, in that two of his designers have reinvented the electric car world.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
seriously, think about that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Like, to the point where even Bob Lutz agrees.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement.
I also think that Mazda is one of those brands that just, it's not about working at the biggest company or working on the fastest cars. It was just like, this is a company that cares about design and the emotion of design. And there's a real soulful, deep kind of approach to achieving that. And that's attractive to designers. I know that attracted me to Mazda.
Well, engineers too, like the Dave Colemans of the world.
Absolutely. It attracts people that are like emotional about cars. And Franz had a huge impact there. Lawrence Vandenacker, I don't know if Lawrence has run the Renault for the last over 10 years, was head up their design. It's just that kind of company,
So let's go back to present day.
Yeah.
Let's talk the future. You guys have been talking about another product. What is that?
Yeah, we're deep at work on our midsize program. So, Air and Gravity kind of set the tone for our market position, design language, certainly our technology capability, our excellence in range and efficiency, performance, road handling, space architecture, all the things that I think we really focus on. Now we're applying that to our midsize program, which is a series of vehicles based on a new platform. That'll move us down market into more premium sector, under the $50,000 price
3
point.
Series kind of thing?
More in the crossover and SUV categories, less in the sedan.
When I say 3 Series, I mean like an X3.
Yeah. In
that size.
Exactly.
Because if you think about it, an Air is a 5 Series size car.
That's correct.
The wheelbase
5 Series
is only,
plus.
Yeah. Wheelbase is longer, but the length is there.
That's right.
So you can't really compare a Lucid to an Air to an S-Class. I would compare it to a 5 Series E-Class size, at least.
That's correct.
So you're going for an X3 size.
That's right. So that's we just refer to that as the midsize category. So you have other competitors, obviously Tesla Model Y, Ford Mach-E, these types of products. And so we'll maintain our kind of all the values and things that we are known for. We're definitely evolving the design language, both inside and out. So there's I think a nice step evolution.
What does that mean? Because if you think about it, there's two schools of thought. There's like the Mercedes, the BMW, where it's the Russian nesting dolls, same general design, different sizes. Then there's Hyundai, which is, we've got one size that's this theme, and we've got this other size that's a completely different theme, but there's elements that they're shared between the two.
That's right. Yeah.
Which direction?
I think we're probably between those two examples you just gave. What's important to understand is I think Air and Gravity are so directly related generationally, and we've, given our startup journey, that kind of spans a lot of time between those two cars to get those two cars on the road. As we look towards moving down market into premium sector, it's a much wider audience. There's an opportunity to do something a little even more vibrant and youthful and kind of expressive, and apply that to multiple vehicles. I also strongly believe that the the look of electric cars has gone through a kind of a big growth and a little bit of a consolidation. So we want to make sure we maintain some standout presence in that now becoming busy category. So we put a lot of focus on how to continue to be Lucid, undeniably, and still have a family representation, but there's going to be some distinct things that stand out.
Like, you know how you do the grill. I love the look of it's like a satin finish, almost. It's like my car has the satin finish.
Yes,
It's that kind of stuff. The satin finish in the front, is that the kind of thing that would continue with the midsize car? Or are you going to go with a completely different
get
thing?
into that kind of specifics. I would just say that the form language of the vehicles is recognizable, but there are elements of the face, detail elements that definitely differentiate not just to existing Lucids, but to competitors.
So what, like, give me 3 things you can tell me about these cars. I got to beat you up.
Yeah, I can tell you we still take aerodynamics very serious. And so there's going to be design elements that are distinct to our aerodynamic profile, and not just profile, but actual details that not only work really well to control drag, but look super cool. So I'm super proud of that, because I think with air and gravity, we also tried to like find solutions that look cool. And see that vent, see that spoiler, see that rocker treatment. That brings 10 counts in that wind tunnel. Like, I know this is car nerd stuff, but I love when you can make form function, and I can tell you we've achieved that a lot with this new car. And the cars are very, they're a little bit more dynamic in profile and in body line and fender shapes. And so there's an emotion.
What does that mean, dynamic? Like,
that just
wide
means
body
like
fenders, like
the
a
car
UR Quattro?
No, it means the car looks like it's more in motion when it's standing still.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So definitively not the Russian nesting doll thing.
I wouldn't say so, but there's a family.
Not so much completely different themes.
No, we're too young of a brand. It's one, if you're like Hyundai and you've got that kind of market presence and you can afford to have.
I mean, they're basically broke into this market in '86. You were 16.
Yeah. I mean, they've been at it a while.
Yeah.
But I think for us, we're so new, it's important that when all of, with air and gravity and these new products are all in a showroom, they need to look like a family, even if, 1 or 2 of them are a little different or a little stand out.
Real quickly, one of the interesting things that I always thought about your role at Mazda, and other car companies really don't do this, you ran design for North America. However, that included not just cars. You were designing the themes in the showrooms, the marketing collateral. Very few car companies do that.
Well,
do you do that
at
Lucid as well?
We started working like that when we started a small brand team within the design team
at
Mazda.
Yeah. And did you duplicate that at Lucid?
Yeah, very much so.
So it's all within the same design ethos of the people creating the cars.
Yeah, but just to make sure we're super clear, that doesn't mean that we're running marketing. Like,
no, I get that part.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the look and feel.
Yeah, the look and feel, the tone,
like
the guidelines.
Colors and everything. Now the screen went down.
The guidelines to the brand, personality of the brand, photography style, video style, editing style. When do we do the same? When do we evolve? I really think it's super important to keep that discipline close to the vehicle design discipline, because everything that we're taking into consideration as we evolve the design language of the cars, and that's the best way to describe it. There are literally things as we're going along and saying, okay, we can't do that, and that anymore. That's the old generation. We need to start evolving, for the car design. Well, we're do the same thing for the brand look and feel and personality. It's still the same DNA. It's just like when you decide to change up your style.
Yeah, I wore a jacket for you today.
You're the same dude, but you're evolving. Brands are the same way, and I think if you can do that with the car, why can't you do that with the rest of the brand touch points? And that's the very much my philosophy around the product design and the brand design.
Speaking of touch points, I kind of told you when you came in, I had the opportunity to shoot the Bugatti Tourbillon.
Crazy car, huh?
Oh my God, I've never been a Bugatti guy, but
Yeah.
can I borrow $4.6 million?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I need 5 because I want to get the package
Yeah,
with the crazy
because
exhaust.
the base model's not good
I
enough.
don't want the base model. Come on, you can't get the cheap Bugatti.
Yeah, you know, if you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Uh,
That car stood out to me. Forget about the crazy 1800 horsepower or the Lola ass end where you can see half this tire.
right.
Well, the reason why it stood out to me is timelessness.
Yeah.
And that car's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid,
Yeah.
got the electric, my whole thing. And everything is like my watch on the inside. Is there a discussion inside of companies like Lucid where it's an electric car, but it's also a luxury car? Do we go backwards? Put toggle switches and watches in our car. Is there anything like that going on inside?
Well, I mean, across design in general, that's car design. I think that's a huge topic, right? And I think there's all places where that makes perfect sense, you know, and you're kind of seeing that in some of the kind of different, let's call them boutique supercars and sports car efforts that are going on. And you're seeing a little bit of that in some more mainstream products. And I think it's super cool. I think it's like anything. Maybe in some ways the industry swung drastically towards the digital
Too far.
and removal of all analog switches. I'm happy to say we never went fully down that road. And we've kept, you know, analog volume buttons and analog heater controls and tactile switch gear. But we're also big proponents of the appropriate size display with the appropriate form factor that looks elegant and light and integrated and not just iPads stuck on
Do you think we'll ever
eyepiece.
get to a point where we see something like a Lucid that has an analog tachometer? I mean, old school, like jewelry type thing.
I would with anything, I'd never say never,
Yeah.
but I struggle with that a little bit.
What? How so? How do you struggle with it? Because I'd see you as a guy that would want that.
Yeah, I don't know.
You own a kit car built in the southeast of England.
Yeah, but it's the same reason I don't put digital displays in that kit car. You know what I mean? It's like it's like when I built my buggy, I put analog gauges in it. I didn't put a digital gauge in it because I felt like that would ruin it.
But I would think that there is an opportunity to reinforce certain timelessness of my design. Granted, I mean, you're the one making the big bucks with car design. I am not.
Yeah.
But that is my thought.
Yeah. I just feel like I feel like with Lucid, it's future facing. It's not that I don't like nostalgic design. I even like a lot of retro design.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
I just don't think that is Lucid.
Okay.
I feel like Lucid is future facing. And if I am forcing a piece of analog hardware that is not very specifically purpose driven, meaning, of course, we want an analog roller switch because that feels better and is easier for those quick inputs for volume control than doing this or sliding on a screen. I don't even need to look at it. I can just do it.
That's the point.
That makes perfect sense. That's why you still have certain switches on your iPhone.
So it's more about the tactile rather than the visual.
Yeah, my thing is like, if the function makes more sense to have an analog experience for tactile and for visual, you know, I'm all for it. Let's embellish it and make it work. If you're saying I need to have this old-fashioned clock on the dash in an otherwise completely contemporary piece of technology of this time, I struggle with that.
I'm not looking for a clock. I'm looking for a tack.
Oh, a tack.
But
yeah,
you talk about future facing.
Yeah.
One of the things that you guys brought to the table, which I think was a huge selling point of Porsche, Hyundai, and you kind of know where I'm going with this, was the architecture, the charging architecture inside the vehicle.
Yeah.
You guys leapfrogged them, and they leapfrogged everybody else. Yeah. Is this new medium-sized car, will it leapfrog where you're, because you're at like, what, 900 or 1,000?
920.
Something,
yeah.
And the previous fastest was 800, which is, the best way to describe it is it's like the number of lanes of electricity
That's
that can
right.
charge
Yeah,
the car.
yeah.
So are you going to jump past that
I
with this new
can't
platform?
specify that. I mean, we are relentless about pursuing EV excellence and moving up. And one of the things I think the reason that's so important is because, well, on one hand, there's a lot of misinformation about electric cars in general, but there's also a wide spectrum of capabilities between the different electric cars and companies on the market. And we just pride ourselves at taking and chipping away at anything that is an obstacle or a deterrent for someone to buy a good electric vehicle. If we can charge it quicker, if we can charge it more efficiently and use less energy in the process, if we can go farther on a smaller battery, we're going to take that opportunity. We're going to develop those technologies. And that's a pursuit that never ends with us. So that's all I can say about that.
While you're on that topic, are you guys doing anything with silicon in the batteries? I know Bob Lutz, the reason why I was talking to him, he's on the board of a company that is doing exactly what you described. The idea is either half the size of the footprint, same range, or same size footprint, triple the range because you've changed the chemical formulation of the battery. Are you at a point to do that now?
Yeah, we're again a similar answer on that one. That's we are constantly looking for the evolution of the technologies and what's going to bring an advantage, whether it's through our own R&D group or through external partners. The team that we have now under Emad Dalala at Lucid is really world class, and the total confidence that team is on top of the technologies that will complement our other suite of technologies, because it also, it's a strategic thing throughout the architecture of the vehicle, what suits us and our driving dynamics and performance intent and so on.
Let's go to a different topic. And I think you kind of know how I like to kind of bring these episodes together. You've had a very interesting career. Fascinating. I mean, you think about it, you got an intern in Zuffenhausen.
It's actually Weissach.
Weissach, excuse me.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. He used to commute to high school on a bicycle. It's at the beach where I took the subway. You picked up a girl at a valet at a fancy restaurant. And then you went to Germany and you're designing TTs and
I didn't design the TT,
and
but
all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If I were to ask you 3 aspects that led to the success of Derek Jenkins, where he is now, what are those 3 things?
Oh gosh. I mean, I have to chalk it up to kind of where I grew up, the time that I grew up, and this, I was very fortunate to grow up in California with this sense of like optimism and excitement and like just kind of this blend of fun, kind of lifestyle, and proximity to the ocean, and that was just, I got lucky, and that was just a really.
So is number 1 luck, or is it the location that you grew up?
I think it was
where
the
you were
location
at
and
the time,
and certainly my parents' influence, and they I think they had similar kind of ideals, and that area really represented that. And it wasn't like I said, it was still a middle class area, but it was it was just that at that time it was still kind of like cool, laid back, safe, but a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
That was kind of that was peak board sports culture, skating, surfing, that was like peak at that time, which was like not just influential in California or North America. I mean, that, like when I moved to Germany, I'm like, there's surf shops in Bavaria. What the hell is this? They look like the surf shops back home. And you realize like, geez, this stuff has a far reach,
Yeah.
And those things come and go, but I think that was just a cool time to be there. And then also conversely, that location topic, just Southern California was the epicenter of like what was kind of the new European cars coming to market, the early Golfs and GTIs and those early small 3 Series and where Porsche was at that time. All of that was just so influential on me that kind of shaped what I think is somewhat eternal. And now what is like really coveted right now for enthusiasts is a lot of that era. And I just think I'm super lucky to have been part of that.
Okay.
And then that led to discovering early on that I wanted to become a car designer. And I think getting an early start, having mentors and people around me, whether it's my high school teacher that told me about Art Center, or getting in front of the right teachers at school, getting my lucky break to have a Porsche internship. But it all is, again, it's proximity. Growing up in California, having the right teacher, getting into the right school, doing the right internship. I had some real great breaks along the way, and that was tied to kind of where, if I'd have grown up somewhere else, I might not have stumbled into those opportunities.
It's funny you say that, because I asked this question of everybody on the show, and you speak like to the Ralphs of the world, folks like that. That's one of the commonalities. There's always someone that invested in them. And when I say invested, I don't mean gave you money, because no one gave you money. It was, hey, this kid can sketch. Did you know there's a place that teaches you how to sketch cars? Like, if someone told me that, there wouldn't have been an ASU. I can guarantee that.
Yeah. It's like having that mentor or just person in your life that understands you enough to give you just a piece of information. They're like, whoa, and that makes such a difference. And then, of course, you get the bigger breaks, like, oh yeah, come intern with us, or you get a boss like Jay Mays or Freeman or Peter Schreier that you have
we didn't even
common
discuss
bond
Peter.
with.
Peter is,
he's amazing.
he was one of my,
Yeah.
you know what? I totally forgot. You know what we'd never shared with the audience? Who was my first ever guest on the original version of this podcast?
Who?
You.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Was I the first?
When we started, before it was in video and we put it on podcast, when the first time we did it just for the YouTube channel, and we did the live thing at the Automobile Driving Museum, that was the first ever episode of this show.
Oh, wow.
In 2014.
I'm honored.
No, I am honored that you are back. And with that,
Thank
thank you, sir, for everything.
always a
Thanks for sharing
pleasure.
the story. Let's get together again and talk about the new car when you get it out.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And the next time you and I are getting together, though, is when I drive your Lotus and shoot it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Really
Thank you,
enjoyed
man.
this. Say hello to Connie for me.
I will do.
Until we see you guys next time, bis später.